At Christmas, I split my time between Peter and Nicole. LA and New York are big cities, major metropolises, but outside of the definition, I don't think you could find two places on Earth more alien to each other. It was invigorating, or at least it had been, visiting both cities in the course of December in past years. New York was often snow, frigid winds, surly cabbies, and plays. LA a few days later was 70 degrees / shirt sleeve weather, in hot pants on side streets, and the latest movie premieres. We usually managed to stroll down Venice Beach and enjoy the boardwalk, the musclemen, and the rollerbladers. I thought about that while I sat in Nicole and Simon's den in their 23rd floor condo holding little Calabria. Despite the name, she was as beautiful a baby as ever breathed on Earth, or the most beautiful little girl baby. Naturally, I was prejudiced. Austin had been the most beautiful baby boy, and now he was the most intelligent and beautiful toddler on Earth. Actually, at this point, Calabria was also a toddler. She wriggled until I let her down, and she staggered toward her father Simon's waiting arms. He grabbed her bottom, made a face, and said to Nicole, "I think she needs changing, dear. Don't you want to demonstrate the superior connection between mother and daughter?" She just laughed and said, "No, dear. I wouldn't think of interfering with the father/daughter bond. You go have fun." He made a face, but kissed his daughter and swept her up and out to the bedroom. My brown-haired daughter, who looked so much like her mother that it hurt to look at her hunched forward on the couch, put her hand over mine. "You're losing weight, Dad, and you look tired. How are you doing? I know we talk, but you can't tell anything over the phone. You could be dying, yet you'd be cheerful and telling me funny stories about the bank, and you'd never let me know what was really going on." "I'm okay, Nicole. You know exactly how little that tells me. How are you really?" Why don't I think you've ever gotten over, Mom?" I freed my hand from hers and held both mine up in a surrender gesture. "What's there to get over, baby? She's gone. That's the reality of it. Getting over it doesn't change it. Whether I do or not, she's still gone. She's always going to be gone, and life goes on. It has to. I want to see little Calabria driving you and Simon crazy when she drags home some scuzzy-looking boyfriend covered with tattoos and piercings." She gave me a sad, half smile. "I know it's coming, Dad. I shouldn't tell you this." "What?" "I promised Mom. I couldn't help myself. Is she all right? She's not sick?" "Not physically." "What do you mean?" "She made me promise." I just looked at her. I'd been around long enough. I'd dealt with enough people who didn't want to talk, who were afraid of the news I was bringing, who didn't want me to know how badly they had screwed up, to know what to say. "Nicole, you brought it up. You want to tell me. Whatever it is, you must think it would be for the best for your mother for me to know it. Is your promise more important than your mother's welfare? Whatever it is, you know I wouldn't hurt her. Even now, I would never hurt her." She sniffed, and I saw the first tear trickle down her cheek. "She told me. Months ago. Maybe I should have told you, but she made me promise. It was so important to her that you not know." I just sat and looked at her. "She left him. 2 months after she left you, and moved to Chicago to be with him. It was less than a month after the divorce papers came through. Him, Kelly? Richard Kelly? She left him?" She licked her lips, which were wet with her tears. She said they just realized it was over. He went back to his wife, and it sank in on me. And she didn't come back to me. She never even thought about it, did she? She wouldn't look at me. You can tell me, baby. I'm a big boy, and the truth is always better. Believe me, I know what I'm talking about. No matter how hard, it's better than lies." She finally looked into my eyes. She said she never wanted to see you again. She wanted to make a new life away from you. She said you would never check up on her. You might never know. And she didn't want. She buried her face in her hands. I sat beside her and held her. She said she didn't want you to know because you'd try to get her back. She said you'd never stop loving her, and she didn't want to hurt you again. She just didn't want to ever see you again. That was as simple as it gets. No second thoughts for Mary. I was part of her past, a part she never wanted to lay eyes on. "I'm sorry, Dad, but..." I knew she was telling me the truth. I could see it in her eyes. You're still in love with her. If you knew she was through with him, you'd have gone after her again, and she was just going to hurt you all over again. Telling you would have hurt you both. I did it for you as well as her. Did Peter know? Yes, we talked about it. It was for the best that you didn't know. I hugged her. Can you forgive me? I didn't know what to do. I did what I thought was best. I hugged her again. I know you did, baby, and there's no reason for you to feel guilty. If you'd told me, it wouldn't have changed anything. Like you said, she was never going to come back. I guess I knew it all along, but there's nothing like having your nose rubbed in the truth. Thank you for telling me. If I had any daydreams, they're gone now. That was 2 weeks before Christmas. I knew, in the roundabout way the kids worked out their schedules, that Mary would be with Peter before Christmas while I was with Nicole, and she'd be with Nicole after Christmas while I was visiting Peter. I flew into LA on December 27th. Peter had been able to arrange for 3 days off, and we ate at a trendy LA restaurant and exchanged our presents under the still green living Christmas tree in their family room. We stayed up past Austin's bedtime for me to enjoy him, and then Marlena, a pretty redhead who had been a nurse at the hospital where Peter had practiced before she'd broken him of his bachelor ways, took Austin to bed and left the two of us looking out the large picture window at a pretty good nightscape of LA. The house was located in the hills, but not high enough to worry too much about mudslides. Nicole told me that she told you about Mom and him. Yeah. Also that I knew and helped keep the secret from you? Yeah, but don't beat yourself up. Like I told her, knowing it wouldn't have made any difference. You were honoring your mother's wishes, and it didn't do me any harm. There's nothing to feel guilty about. He took a sip of a non-alcoholic beer from a chilled Coors mug and didn't look at me as he said, I don't feel guilty, Dad. I don't think it would have done you any good. What I feel is sad. Sad for both of you. I just looked at him. Both of us? Yeah. He looked at me then. You can lie to Nicole, but I know better. You're still in love with her. You might be with ladies back in Jacksonville, but you haven't moved on. I know you. That's what hurts. You're a one-woman man, and I don't think you're ever going to be able to move on. I just shrugged. You probably have me pegged, but I know your mother is probably broken up about what happened between her and him. After all, she gave up a lot to be with him, but she's still a beautiful woman. She's probably in another relationship by now, or she will be. She won't be alone. You're wrong, which is what makes it so infuriating. I looked at him, wondering what caused the sudden strong rush of emotion. We saw her a couple of times while she was with him. Once she came here, and the other time Marlena flew to Chicago with Austin. We both thought the same thing. I waited him out. She wasn't happy, Dad. I don't think she ever was. Marlena had the same impression. She asked her, flat out, if she was in love with him. She was trying to figure out why she would have left you for him, and Mom just shook her head. Then I talked to her through Skype video a few days after the divorce went through. He took another sip and then looked me in the eye. I know you won't believe me, it makes no sense, but she was miserable. She sounded like she was going to break into tears after every other word, and that's made what happened make sense. This was new. What happened? Nicole didn't tell you? When I shook my head, he said, a week after she told us she and Richard had split, she called us from San Francisco. She had gotten another transfer. She's been there for more than 4 months now. I took a strong gulp of the Napoleon brandy in my snifter and couldn't help saying, well, that makes sense anyway. She moves to Chicago to get away from me, and then she keeps heading west to California. I guess the only way she could get any further away would be to head for Hawaii. I think she was trying to get away from both of you. I can understand it, though. I gave him a curious look. I think that when she thinks of you, she realizes what she gave up, and when she thinks of him, she realizes what a waste, what a mistake it all was. After another minute of silence, what was there left to say after that? He turned away from me to look out through the plate glass window. Our reflections wavered in the moonlight from outside. I know, Dad, that you must have wondered why I took it so hard, finding out about Mom and that guy. I mean, I'm not 15. I'm a grown man. I know you're adults and I know parents split, but I acted like I was some emotional teenager. Looking back, yeah, I wondered a little bit. You've always been so calm, rational, like me. He turned around and looked behind me, to the doorway leading to the second floor where they had their bedrooms. I didn't even realize what it was at the time. I knew I exploded, but it was weeks later when it finally hit me. I was afraid. Afraid? You and Mom are our rock, me and Nicole. A lot of my friends went through one divorce, some 2 or 3, with all the crap that involves. Your parents fighting and wanting you to pick sides, and dads trying to bribe you with presents and squeeze a week's worth of living into a weekend, and moms spending every minute telling you what a piece of crap your father is. You guys just sailed along. You were always there for us. When I met Marlena and started getting serious, the first thing I started asking myself was whether she was like Mom, and she is. You probably don't see it, but she is. She's loving and funny, and she's hotter than hell, and I've never spent 1 second worrying about her. Even when she was working around dogs that were used to banging every nurse and female volunteer within arm's length. She's honest, that's the word. There have been a few times when she's been attracted to guys. She's told me about it, and I F her brains out until she got over it. But I knew she'd never go behind my back. I knew if she ever wanted out, she respected me enough that she'd tell me. He took a sip of non-alcoholic beer, which to me is nothing more than flavored water. But he had never been tempted by liquor, and that was a good thing for a man in his line of work. Then Richard Kelly happened. I tried. I really tried to get Mom to explain to me how it happened, yet she never could. So, I go to work and try to focus on patience and cutting into people's brains without worrying about Marlena and guys she might be meeting. She's a homemaker now, but she shops, and I used to use supermarkets as prime hunting grounds for new toys. She takes Austin to pediatricians and specialists, and there are guys there. She still has her nursing certification, and once in a while she has to take a short course or go to a seminar to keep it up, and there are guys there. He looked at my reflection in the glass. You know, I trust her, Dad. I really do. But I would have bet my life, put my head on a guillotine on a bet that Mom would never look at another man. I play these little psychological games in my head. I picture the day when Marlena walks into the den after she's put Austin down. Or maybe he's grown and out on a date, and she tells me, "Peter, I've met someone and I'm leaving you." I guess I run these little scenarios in my head to see if I could go on breathing, go on working like you have, after my life ends. He stopped again for a moment. Mom stole my certainty. She took away the belief that happy ever after can ever be a reality. There are days when I hate her so much. I'll never be able to trust that Marlena and I will stay together, and that kills me. I gave him some time. You know you have to get past this, don't you? You're too smart a man not to see it. If you keep wondering, keep seeing her cheating in your mind's eye, keep seeing that day when she'll walk in and tell you she's leaving you, it will become a self-fulfilling prophecy. You'll make it happen. I don't know how. I walked up behind him and put my hand on his shoulder. You're a rational man, like me, Peter. You know there are millions of couples in this country, hundreds of millions around the world. Millions of them will break up. Hearts will be broken and lives destroyed. That happens, but remember and realize that millions of them will sail through and never be tempted, never be tested. Yet other millions will be tested and, maybe, fall, but they'll get back up and make their marriages work. Life is a numbers game, and you just have to assume that you'll be one of the lucky millions. Let's say you're one of the unlucky ones. Say that one day a year, or 36 from now, Marlena walks in and says she's leaving you. Say she breaks your heart. Would you regret marrying her? Would you regret having Austin with her? Would you regret 1 minute of your time with her? He was silent for a long time. No, I don't think I would. Have you ever been sorry you married Mom? Not for 1 minute. Look, Peter, we can't ever know the future. If I'd known 36 years ago what was coming, and I'd had a chance to see what those 36 years would be like, I wouldn't have done anything different, except keep her away from that trip where she met Richard Kelly. I knew it was a mistake, but I couldn't help myself. I emailed her at her old email address, assuming that she would have kept it for business continuity. I wrote, "Mary, Nicole and Peter just spilled the beans. Don't blame them. It was a heavy secret to keep, and they did a good job for 4 months. I don't know that my opinion or concern means anything to you, but I'm sorry that things didn't work out between you and Richard. I know you, and I know that even if you couldn't tell me, he meant something to you. You're not the sort of woman that would throw away a life for a momentary thrill. Peter told me that he doesn't think you're happy. He's a pretty smart man. Gets that from me. I guess. If he's right, I just wanted to tell you that you are welcome to email me anytime about anything. We've always been able to talk about anything. We're not together. I've accepted that. We will have separate lives from this point on, but we were friends, as well as lovers and husband and wife. Despite everything that's happened, I still consider myself your friend. There are no strings or conditions. Email me if you want to talk about anything. Q. I never received a reply. I really didn't expect one. It was just something I felt I had to do. Life went on. I went on plenty of fish because the idea of getting involved with someone from the bank or the banking community or someone I might have to rub shoulders with seemed less and less like a great idea. An online meeting place for singles seemed like a better idea. I could meet and date and flame out and not have to face unhappy or disappointed or rejected women on a daily basis. It seemed like a perfect way of life. I met some nice, intriguing women on the fish market, as some called it. Some were desperate for husbands. Some just wanted a great F after being told by their husbands or significant others that they were dogs in the bedroom. I stayed away from the husband hunters, but I convinced a few ladies who might not have been as curvy or slender as they had been decades ago, that in the right hands they could still burn up the sheet. And there were a few ladies that never wound up in my bed, but became friends. These were ladies I could talk to, exchange jokes online, and go to the Times Union Center for the Performing Arts in downtown Jacksonville for a local production of a Broadway play, and maybe drinks later with no expectation of afterward. Business went on as it always had, but there were disquieting rumbles on the national stage, and the mortgage market and the home-building sector quivered as the first shocks of an approaching earthquake began to be felt. Something bad was coming. Gale and Coffee, and wiser heads than mine, met and started hunkering down for the coming storm. Bad things were indeed coming, even if the majority of the banking industry and the business community continued to whistle past the graveyard. But Gale was as hard-headed as her grandfather had ever been. She had learned at his knee, and she was ready to do whatever was necessary to keep the Hunt brand alive for another generation. Me, I was the hatchet man, the muscle. I closed banks on the bubble. I called in loans that were already dead but not buried, foreclosed, presided over the sale and liquidation of companies that either had always been bad ideas or had become bad ideas. I closed out investments and in every case went for cash over stock and other options. I spent a lot of time closing weak banks, firing people and buying new banks, consolidating positions and firing people. I fired a lot of people that year. I told middle-aged men that their positions had become redundant and they would have to go out into a hostile world and make a new life for themselves. A few of them didn't make it past the day I had told them they were out. One dropped dead with a heart attack, walking out of what had been his office. Two committed what in ways they thought might not invalidate large life insurance policies for their families. One guy got away with it, one didn't. It was not a warm and fuzzy period, either in my personal life or business. However, business, even the banking business, is not the dry ledgers and green eyeshade picture people on the outside have. It is kill or die, survival of the fittest, done wearing suits and ties. It is still nature, red in tooth and claw. Another Christmas came and went, a new president, a new world in a lot of ways. Peter asked me, "Is there anybody special in your life, Dad?" "No, I've got a decent social life. There are ladies who are good friends. They make me laugh." "Getting any action?" "Enough." "Details?" "Pervert." "He is one, isn't he?" said Marlena with a smile as she came up behind Peter and rested her head against his chest. Then she grinned and said, "Thank God." I just looked at my son, and he looked back at me as he kissed the top of his wife's head, and I felt better about the two of them. I thought he had gotten past the wound of his mother's infidelity, and I was glad somebody had. Nicole asked me the same question, more genteelly. "Are you happy, Dad? Is there anybody special?" "Yes and no. I have friends. I go out. I'm not alone. I've got my work, the people at the bank, a job that takes up about 60 hours of my week. It's not a bad life. Honestly, it's not as good as the life I had with your mother, but it's as good as a life can be without her. Really, I'm looking at 60. I'm not going to remarry, not raise any more kids. The real part of my life, you guys, is behind me. I'm ready to be a doting grandpa. Don't worry about me, Nicole. I'm all right." She didn't say anything, but I could tell she wanted me to ask, "How is your mother?" "Not good. Physically, partly, she's lost weight. She looks older. She's never looked her age. She's starting to look her age. She's had a rough couple of years, baby." "Rougher than you?" "Maybe. Remember, I was the innocent party. Breaking somebody's heart, cheating on them, leading two lives, it can't be easy. Then we broke up. Then she broke up with her new guy and... Has she had anybody in the year since then?" "She's gone on dates, I know that, but nobody serious." There was a part of me that was happy hearing that. I wanted her to hurt, but I put myself in her shoes. If it had been me 10 years ago, and I had been the one who cheated on her for nearly a year, and I'd had to face her and confess what I'd done, it probably would have killed me. It's easy to be the innocent party. If all the blame and guilt and shame had been mine, especially if I still had any feeling for her, it would have torn me up. If she was human, she had to have guilt over what she had done to a man that loved her. I don't know what I can do, baby. I sent her an email a while back, letting her know that I still considered us friends and that she could always talk to me. I never heard back from her. Is that true, Dad? Do you still think of her as a friend after everything that's happened? Yeah, we were always friends as well as lovers. There was never anybody else I could talk over anything with as easily as I could with her. I valued her advice, her intelligence. She could always make me laugh, no matter how bad the day had been. If we hadn't been married, hadn't been lovers, I think we would have been good friends. There was just something. We clicked. I don't know how to describe it better than that. Could you be her friend again, Dad? She doesn't want my friendship, baby, or my love. It can't get any clearer than that. She needs a friend, Dad. She needs you. She will never tell you or let you know, but she's dying inside. She's not the woman we've always known. Could you try to contact her, for me and Peter? I know it will be hard for you, but you can do anything. You remember when I was little? You told me there would never be anything I could ask that you wouldn't do, and there was never anything I asked that you didn't do. I really thought that if I asked you to grab the moon and bring it to me, somehow you'd do it. And I would have, but this. I looked into her eyes and saw her mother and knew that I'd never be able to deny her anything, even when I knew it was impossible. I'll try to talk to her, baby. I'll do my best. I emailed her the next week and found that she'd changed her email address. It came back no such email address on her server. I got the number of the McDaniel San Francisco office and called and asked to speak to Ms. Mary Meadows. Can I tell her who's calling, sir? Hugh Davidson. Please hold. After a long hold, the pleasant voice came back on the phone and said, I'm sorry, Ms. Meadows is out of the office. Well, could I leave a message on her voicemail? Another long silence. I'm sorry, sir, but her voicemail box is completely full. Well, could I leave a message with you? I'm very sorry, but I have 4 calls holding. Could you call again later? She was unavailable 10 minutes after her office opened, 10 minutes before lunch, 30 minutes after lunch, and a half hour before the close of business. Repeat this Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday. Add to that her voicemail box was always full or on the fritz. Naturally, they couldn't release her email address as it was contrary to company policy. I tried for 2 weeks before, finally, a frazzled, once friendly, voice said, I'm sorry you're having so many problems, sir, but this is a business office. I hate to be rude, so please excuse me, but your calling has become somewhat of a problem. We have people calling on business matters, and we really can't afford to be besieged by personal calls for our staff. How do you know it's personal? I've never told you why I'm calling. It could be business. After another long silence, I'm so sorry, sir, but you're putting me in a very awkward position. Please. I knew I was. She was just a secretary/receptionist, following her boss orders, which were to shut me out completely. Mary wouldn't give an inch, wouldn't even let me explain why I was calling. I remembered what she had told Matt Henry. No contact, no messages. She didn't even want to breathe the same air that I was breathing. She didn't want to be in the same city. I could have flown to San Francisco and walked into the front door of the main McDaniel's office, but I knew I'd never get past the phalanx of secretaries, staffers, and security she would throw up to ward me off. The more I thought about it, the angrier I got. It took a day to reach critical mass. It wasn't enough that she had destroyed my world, broken my heart, left me alone in the moonlight with ghosts and shadows while she first F Richard Kelly and then her unknown boyfriends. She couldn't even show the common decency to acknowledge my existence. It was as if, for her, I had already died. So the next day, amidst my anger and distress, for just a few minutes I let out the demons. I emailed a message to the General Communications URL for the McDaniel San Francisco office. Right then I didn't care how many secretaries, flunkies, or co-workers saw it. Ms. Meadows, Mary, or should I say, you bitch. This is your ex-husband, the man who loved and cherished you for 36 years before you decided to turn into AS and F some younger man. In case you've forgotten, I am the man who never cheated on you. I apologize for trying to call and talk to you. Obviously, the thought of hearing my voice is so distasteful that you bullied a receptionist to lie to me repeatedly. You didn't have the simple decency to come on the phone yourself and tell me you didn't want to talk to me. Why am I surprised? That you have no decency should not have come as a surprise. I made myself believe that you were a decent woman for 36 years, but that was always a lie, wasn't it? A lie because you have always been a cheating ass. I just never let myself see it. I was too blinded by love, which I'm sure you don't understand because I am certain that you have never had a moment's love for me in all our years together. I look back and remember that you belonged to another man when you s my, and let me F you. You were cheating on a man you had planned to marry. Because you were cheating with me, I made myself believe it was simply an overwhelming passion that led you to my bed. But our marriage started with an act of betrayal on your part. I am fairly certain, being the cold-blooded bee that you made a conscious decision that you'd have a better, more profitable life with me than your former fiancé. You knew I came from money, and you made a bet that riding my would lead you to a comfortable life, which it did, for more than 30 years. There was never anything you wanted that I didn't give you willingly. I gave you 2 children you loved, unless you were lying about that too. Looking back, I can't help but wonder if Richard Kelly was the first man you S and F while pretending to be my loving wife. I was such an idiot. I knew you were gone so much of the time, that you were a sexual dynamo, and I really believed that you were celibate all those long nights you spent away from me. Now I really do believe, and this isn't just anger and spite, that you were cheating on me for so many years. I think your story of resisting Richard for months was lie. I think that very first night you S him and let him have what you had promised to me alone. I think you are a liar and a cheat. I think you are a selfish, cold-hearted bee in every sense of that word. Looking back, even if it had cost me Peter and Nicole, I wish that you had decided that your Harvard fiancé was a better long-term bet than me. I wish you had never pretended to fall in love with me. I wish that I had had the chance to meet a loving, kind, and true woman to make my wife. I wish I had not wasted the larger portion of my life being devoted to a woman who existed only in my imagination. Now it is too late. I am nearly 60. There will be no opportunity to relive my life and find a better wife. Or possibly just an honest W that I could have F and known what the bargain was going in. When I left you, the day you finally were honest with me, I thanked you for the years you had given to me and wished you well. You have to know I was lying. I am happy only that your boyfriend finally got tired of you, kicked your aging ass out, and went back to his wife. I've heard your story, but I am sure mine is the more reliable. You are an aging, fading stupid beauty. You are getting old, your looks are going, and you really believed a 45-year-old man wanted to start a new life with you? You believed his lie and left a faithful husband for a few months of good F. You are still an attractive woman, in a certain light, so I think you can keep yourself out, although your Johns will be getting older and more desperate as time goes on. I can only hope that your desperate search for new leads you to contract one of the uglier, more painful, or possibly fatal diseases going around. When you are gone, I want you to know that I will come to your graveside. I will come, not to your bedside to forgive you while you are still alive, but to your grave to piss on the soil lying above the decaying body of the worst woman that it has ever been my misfortune to know. You will never know the depths of the hatred I feel for you, and that is the chief regret that I live with daily. Hugh. I wrote it in the white heat of passion and hit the send key without a thought. A storm of emotions swept through me, but chief among them was release and relief. I had previously been noble and loving and forgave a woman who tore my heart out, but what I really felt was contained in the words I pounded out in just a few minutes. I hoped to God that she was still capable of being hurt by me because I wanted to hurt her. I thought, just for a moment, of destroying Richard Kelly. I could do it, no matter his political connections or his family's power. I had been the hatchet man, the destroyer of lives and careers and communities for all these years, my own native intelligence backed by the power of the hundreds of millions of dollars the Hunt family controlled. I could have him killed, could destroy his marriage if he really had gone back to his wife. I could leave him bankrupt and on the street, or in a cell somewhere being F up the ass by the largest, meanest concentration of human monsters I could round up. I toyed with the idea for a few hours. Gail would back me up, and it could be done without leaving fingerprints. Then, reluctantly, I dismissed the fantasies. I wasn't that kind of man. I didn't want to become the kind of man who could do that for personal revenge. The terrible things I'd done dispassionately. The people whose lives I'd ruined or hurt, I damaged only as part of my job. There was a line I wasn't willing to cross, not now, hopefully never. Then I had time to regret the words I'd sent to Mary. I felt better than I had in more than a year. They were the words in my heart from the moment she told me about Richard Kelly. I felt the way you feel when you're totally nauseous, then you manage to vomit and the nausea wanes. No, I felt bad because I imagined what Peter and Nicole would think if they saw that email. It would hurt them as well as their mother, but it was too late. The message was gone. I somehow doubted that was the help Nicole had hoped I'd give her mother, but sometimes, even the greatest miracle worker fails, and I had tried to re-establish contact with Mary. The blame was on her. I never heard back from the email. Peter and Nicole never indicated they were aware of it, and neither one of them is that good an actor, so she never told them, although I imagine she must have known of it. It was like dropping a pebble into a well and having it vanish without a sound, a ripple, as if it had never been dropped. It was clear one more time that I simply didn't exist for Mary any longer. Life went on. The housing, banking, and economic crises that shook the nation became real. Most banks around the country quivered and trembled, and bank directors resigned, or were approached by feds wanting to know if they had played a part in bringing the crisis on. The feds came sniffing around us, but not because we were in trouble. We were one of the only major banks in the nation that stood like a rock. Our books were good, our loans were solid, and our customers were protected. Gail Hunt and her board of directors would not accept any federal aid, loans, guarantees, nor any hint of federal control through federal strings tied to money that was going to prop up other banks. That brought a lot of interest in certain quarters, and we had visits from nameless, but very powerful individuals wanting, in very simple terms, a finger in our very prosperous financial pie. I attended one meeting with Gail, Percy, Bobby, two other directors, a man from an unnamed important federal agency, and two highly placed FBI officials. The meeting began low-key, then rather quickly deteriorated into thinly veiled threats from the feds. The Hunt Bank was a financial powerhouse, but it wasn't the sovereign government of the United States. It would be best for everyone concerned if the bank could work in harmony with the policies and aims of the federal government. In the interest of harmony, the bank would have to accept federal funding and federal oversight of its operations. Gail indicated that would not happen. The federal official looked at her like she had lost her mind and said that she was a beautiful woman and that beautiful women did not do well in federal prisons due to attentions from male and female guards and inmates. I would hate to see that happen to a vibrant person like you, the Fed said, but policy differences between private businesses and the government inevitably come down to a moment of choice. Will you do what we ask, or will you violate the law and give up your freedom and the future growth of this bank that your grandfather devoted his life to? She just looked at him for a moment, then stood up. The Fed looked at her curiously. I have a private office in the other room, she said calmly. Would you please come with me? I have something I'd like to show you, and we can discuss this matter further. They walked out together, and 10 minutes later they walked back in. The Fed never said a word, just gestured to the FBI guys, and they walked out. We never heard back from him. We continued to have visitors, but they were low-level and very polite. I never found out what Gail said or showed to the unnamed Fed, but back in the 80s when first Mafia and then South American criminal elements tried to move into the banking business, Old Man Hunt had simply made phone calls and suddenly they went away. I knew he had been a smart man. He liked to find out secrets and keep them tucked away for future use. I had never had any curiosity about what secrets he kept. I thought it was healthier to pretend I knew nothing about them. We approached the summer, and I got a call from Nicole telling me that Brandy Summers, her best friend and our almost adopted daughter, was getting married in New York City. Brandy was a lithe redhead who had been Nicole's best friend before her parents had suffered an acrimonious divorce. In the middle of the divorce, her mother had been diagnosed with a particularly malignant form of breast cancer, while her father had moved to Brazil after falling in love with a 24-year-old graduate student he'd met while teaching a course at the University of North Florida. Brandy had no other close kin, and with the approval of her mother, the benign neglect of her father, and an okay from distant maternal grandparents, the 15-year-old moved in with us and lived with us for 3 years until she went off to college with Nicole. She was as close as you can get to being a daughter without having blood ties. She's met this great guy from Boston. He's a college professor, teaches English. He actually lived and taught in Jacksonville for a while. He's divorced, and she met him when he came on the staff at the private school where she's been teaching for the last 5 years. She put up a fight. After all the a-holes she's been involved with over the years, she was very gun-shy, but she's head over heels. Anyway, she wants a June wedding. She's going to have it at the home of the dean of the school where she's teaching, and she wants you to be there, to give her away, as her father. After a moment, I had to ask, I'm honored, but what about her father? She hasn't heard from him in 5 years. That was when he emailed her that his new bride had just had twins, and that between those and his job in Sao Paulo, he just wouldn't have time to keep up the connections with her. As if the son of a bitch had stayed in contact since he left the country. No, you're the closest thing she has to a father. She wants you. Of course. I'll be glad to give her away. Let me know the time, and I'll be there with bells on and a very nice wedding gift. 3 days later, I got another call from Nicole, and I knew it was bad news before she said more than a few words. Dad, I don't know how to ask this, but... What? Brandy wanted both of you at the wedding. You know how close she was to Mom. I knew. As much as I think she loved me as a surrogate father, Mary had been her mother in everything but blood. Brandy had needed a woman during that period in her life as she became a young woman, and Mary had been there for her. I think I know what you're going to say. Tell me. Brandy didn't. I didn't. I couldn't believe that Mom wouldn't be able to put the past aside. But she won't come if I'm there. I'm so sorry, Dad. I thought about it for only a moment. It was Brandy's day, the most important of her life, and she needed Mary more than she needed me. Tell Brandy I'll be there in spirit, and I'll visit with her and her new hubby later this year. Tell her to get good pictures for me, okay? Okay, Dad. And I could hear her crying. It was on a warm Sunday in July, and the dean's house was a big old, comfortable New York upstate farmhouse transformed into a 21st century mansion. It was in the center of what had been an apple orchard at one time. Guests parked all around, and the backyard had been transformed into an open-air chapel. I came in by taxi, walked in quietly when I knew most people were gathering for the ceremony. I stood at the back window and watched as Brandy and her slightly shorter professor fiancé exchanged their vows under an apple tree groaning with red fruit. After the vows, there was a meet and greet line, and I slipped in at the end, holding her wedding present wrapped in green and blue paper. Family and close friends stood at either side of the happy couple. Brandy looked up and realized who I was. "Hugh!" she almost shouted, and then ran to me. As she ran, I looked beyond her, to the tall, brown-haired woman dressed in a light, summery creation of sheer fabric and embroidered flowers. When she heard Brandy's call, her gaze turned from a woman who had been shaking her hand toward me. Maybe Nicole and Peter were right, and she had had a hard life these last almost 2 years. Maybe she had aged and lost the sheen of youth, the tight skin and clear eyes that had made her seem a decade younger than she was, but if she had, I couldn't tell it. We stared at each other for what had to be decades. I couldn't take my eyes off her, and she didn't move her gaze an inch in either direction. Then Brandy was in my arms, and I had lowered my gaze to kiss her forehead. We babbled. When I looked up again, the tall, brown-haired woman was gone. I met Brandy's young professor, talked with Nicole and Simon, had one piece of cake, and then made my excuses. I had urgent business back in Jacksonville. I'd only flown up to say hello, and I would see them later. When both Brandy and Nicole refused to believe those lies, I looked up at a sea of strangers and said, "There are a lot more wedding festivities to go. Mary won't come out again if I'm around. I'm not going to spoil things for you. I was here. I gave you a kiss, met your young man, and now it's time to go." As I was getting ready to go, I remembered the package I had brought with me and gave it to Brandy, asking her to put it into the pile of wedding gifts they'd open later. She shook her head and said, "No, Hugh. This is from you. I want to see it now." Like a kid tearing into a present on Christmas morning, she destroyed the wrapping. Nicole and Simon and Brandy's new husband looked at her with amused eyes. Then she held the framed photograph up in the afternoon sunlight and began to cry. Nicole took one look at it and began to cry and put her arms around her. Simon and Brandy's husband just looked at the picture and then realized what it was. It had been taken when Mary and I were a loving couple, with our almost grown 2 daughters and Peter standing between us. It was a Christmas photo of a time long gone. I hugged her one last time, saying, "For the good memories we had." And then I left, and on the flight back to Jacksonville, I closed my eyes and saw that brown-eyed, brown-haired lady in the lace and flowers, like the after-image of a nova that has burned itself into your retina. I couldn't erase that image, but I didn't really want to.